Welcome back to the show, Terry Cole.
Why, I'm so psyched to be here, Jace. Hi.
Hi. Great to see you again, as always. Really psyched to hear about your new book, get a copy. It's amazing. Psyched to dig into some of that as well as just hearing your wisdom, advice, life experience around boundaries specifically, because you are the boundary boss.
Why, thanks.
Yeah, so helpful. Such an important conversation, just boundaries in general. And I thought we'd start the conversation with this, I guess, this label that gets thrown around called codependency. And why, if we're going to talk about boundaries, why do we also need to talk about codependency?
Well, that's a great question because codependency, if these things, having healthy boundaries, being a boundary boss, and being actively codependent are mutually exclusive. These things can't go together because the definition of being codependent is having disordered boundaries. Literally, that's the definition. So, my definition of codependency is being overly invested in the feeling states, the decision making, the outcomes of the people in our life to the detriment of our own internal peace or to the detriment of our own life. So, because a lot of people will say, well, of course, I'm invested in the feeling state of the person I love. Right. But it can't be to the degree that when they have a problem, it literally feels like you're a problem and you're dancing as fast as you can to fix their problem. That's what codependency is. And inherent in that is disordered boundaries, right? Disordered emotional boundaries, which means you don't know what's on your side of the street. You think everything is on your side of the street. And it's, I mean, for most people who really suffer with codependency, you may have a little idea of what it is. But what I find in my practice, because my therapy practice for the past almost 2.5 decades, a lot made up of women similar to my life experience. So people in the business world, people who are a little bit crushing it out there in the world, CEOs, CFOs, Broadway performers, pop stars, a bunch of people who from the outside you'd look at and be like, that person's got it all together. And so when I wanted to talk to them early on in my practice, when I started seeing this whole thing with boundaries and this whole thing with codependency, what an epidemic it was, if I brought up codependency, it's almost like immediately in their mind, the book, Codependent No More with Melody Beattie would pop into their mind like, well, I'm not in a relationship with an alcoholic. Like, this old school sort of definition, which I don't even think is fair because her stuff is updated and amazing. But that their reaction would be like, are you nuts? I'm not good. Everyone's dependent on me, dude. I'm the one who's doing it all. I'm like, right.
You're like, exactly.
That's what I'm saying. But what I did come up with, though, because I felt the same way until I had years of therapy, I would never have identified as codependent because the thing that we don't talk about a lot with codependency is that it really is a covert and overt bid for control. We just want to stop you from making that mistake so bad. We're going to get in touch with our friend who can help you. I know someone who did this. I'm sending you excerpts from the book. I'm helping. I'm doing.
Yep.
But that's not your side of the street, right?
Totally. Are you saying this person is? I'm almost like feeling anxious as you talk about it because what is this person that is behaving this way? Are they anxious? Are they responding from it like an inability, unwillingness to just be with their experience because it's so painful to see someone else in pain, or what? How would you describe that?
Yes, but it's fear. It's like there's this need to control because there's a fear that something bad is going to happen. And for most of us, like I'm a recovering, and it'll always be a discipline. It's just like being in recovery from alcoholism for me, where it isn't like I'm cured of being a codependent. No, I work on that shit every single day because my instinct is still to want to be like, well, I have a thought about what you should do.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm healthy enough to, I backed away from all the fixing. But with high functioning codependency, right? This is the new moniker that I created because my clients were like, I'm not that other thing. as soon as I started describing, it's like being so high functioning, which most of my clients were very high functioning, that they could do all of it. They were running the world and the PTO and their family and their girlfriends and getting people into whatever they were doing. But it is at a cost.
Yeah.
So when I started talking about the cost of like how exhausted you are when you are over functioning, over giving, over feeling in this way, when you are the center, right? We center other people's problems on ourselves as codependents as well. Like, I'm the solution, but you're not. And part of how I came to this in my own life was through this really painful experience with someone that I love very much, who was always, and one of my sisters, always in bad relationships, always addicted, problems, issues. And, she was in a terrible relationship, and I was crying to my therapist and being like, I don't get it. What's the deal? I mean, this is just so wrong. I'm going to see if I can get her to move out. She was literally living in the woods with no running water, with a guy who was on crack, who was physically abusive. Like, I'm not embellishing one bit.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
That's the actual situation. And my therapist was like, let me ask you something, Tara. And because I had been continually talking about this, trying to get my sister away from him. And she was like, what makes you think you know what Jenna needs to learn in this life? And I was like, well, Ruth, I think we can both agree that she doesn't need to do it this way. She was like, actually, no. How can I agree with that? I have no idea what your sister's life lessons are. So what's really happening is that her dumpster fire of a life is really messing with the 20 years it's taken you to create any internal peace, your own sobriety. You really want your pain to stop. And I was like,
yeah,
that is accurate. I really do.
Yeah.
But it shifted something, because then I said to her, so is it not my job? And she was like, Tara, not only is it not your job, it's impossible. Like, what you're trying to do and what you might even be doing is you're creating all of these temporary fixes that are temporarily relieving some of her pain. And it might just be that pain that's going to drive her
Exactly.
to change what she needs to change. So that was a real wake up for me.
Totally. And I kind of hear in that, how I describe that is like you begin to rob someone of their journey. If you keep saving them at every corner or trying to buffer them from falling on their face, it's the very falling on their face that sometimes people need to wake up, right?
Absolutely. Think about yourself. I'm sorry. Like, the most important lessons of my life have sucked.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I like to learn the hard way. I like to repeat a pattern many, many times for many years,
I like to learn the hard way. Maybe we all like to learn the hard way, Jace, but
yeah. So high functioning codependency, what I'm hearing is, if we can just, for the listener, distinguish between high functioning and low functioning, if I can take a crack at high functioning based on what you're saying, is someone who's doing extremely well in life and getting socially rewarded for that. Whether it's lots of status or friends or acknowledgement, like, you're so awesome. Wow, you're so amazing. You help so many people. And it just sort of feeds that part of them that's like, yeah, this is how I get value. But then at what cost is kind of what you're saying. So that's more on the high functioning side, right? And what's the low functioning side, or the sort of traditional, more codependent thing?
Well, here's the thing. It's I don't know that it's low functioning. They're both dysfunctional, right? But the regular codependency, if that is more in my mind around being with people who are under functioning. So we're over functioning, right? So addicts, someone's debting, sex addiction, like lots of different things, like, or just under functioning, just under earning, just not doing their share, right? So we're over functioning. With high functioning codependency, it doesn't look like codependency. So it's
Mm-hmm.
harder to, because
Mm-hmm.
it's someone who is projecting, like you said, this image of like having it together, being the one. But the internal problem and where it leads is the same place, whether it's codependency, codependent no more codependency, or whether it's Terry Cole's notion of high functioning codependency. There's only one place where that behavior can lead, which is to, I always say there's only one stop on that train. It's Bitterland. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
You can only do it for so long. You can only do it even remotely lovingly for so long, because what ends up happening is that nobody has the bandwidth to do this forever. Now we start resenting.
Yeah.
Why aren't they taking my advice? After everything I do for
Totally.
them, if they had just done it, they wouldn't. So I'm not giving her sympathy because I told her to leave that a-hole, but she didn't. So if she had just listened to me, again, we can't be with that person's pain, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're like, no, if I told her what to do, she didn't do it. This is obviously not good for relationships,
Yeah.
but it's not good for us either,
Right. So let's talk about the cost, because I'm imagining now some listeners are like, okay, you got me. I fall into this camp. I know several of the high functioning codependents that you're describing here, and I don't know that they see the cost. So at what point do things start to come apart where they do see the cost? Like what are some of the signs and symptoms of I'm burning out, or I'm doing too much, or I'm now resenting? Like what happens?
But Jason, here's the thing. Some people will never connect the cost that they're experiencing to their high functioning codependency in the way
Right.
that they're living. So let's actually make that connection. So
Uh-huh.
people would come into my office presenting with autoimmune disorders,
Totally. Health
exhaustion,
problems. Yeah.
a ton of resentment
Hmm.
and anger. But for a lot of women in particular, anger is something that can be difficult to access. So it gets turned in as
Hmm.
depression, as going to numbing behaviors like,
Hmm.
drinking too much, eating too much, falling in a Netflix hole every night, whatever the thing is to like not feel.
Hmm.
So these are the real cost, though, is that when we are so focused outward at controlling the lives and the experiences of other people, even if they want us to, right? Trust me, as a recovering codependent, people, they want you to. They
Yeah.
will continue to be like, but you're the rock. You have
Right.
the
Help me out.
answers.
Hook me up. Yeah.
You're the oracle. Why don't we do it?
Hmm.
Um, so learning how to just say, what do you think? I now never give anyone my opinion until I ask them what they think.
Yeah.
Like, where are you
Right.
at?
That's a
What is
good
your
little
gut?
move. Yep.
Right? Because what you see is you become such a better friend
Hmm.
when you stop centering someone else's experience on you and your expertise and being the savior, and you actually embolden your friend to find her own answers, because
Yeah.
she has her own answers, right? You don't have them. She's got to make her, anybody has to make their own mistakes. And how about know your friend by saying, but so what do you think? Or what's your gut? Or where are you at with that? I do a whole thing on like expansive in the book too, like expansive. Can we become expert listeners?
Yeah.
Like once we realize what codependency really is, how can we have how can we deepen our relationships? And
Hmm.
that really is through communication. Like, can you say more about that? Then what happened? How did that make you feel? What do you
Yeah.
think about that now? What's going on? Like, I'm not saying it has to be like the Inquisition, but wait to talking is so popular where the person talks and then you're like, oh my God, yeah, that's like me. Like when I
Yeah.
had that same experience, I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah. So
super
you're
don't.
I almost hear you setting a boundary here with yourself, right? I am going to stop doing my habit of giving them advice or telling them what to do, saving them, etc., and I'm going to start listening, for example,
Yeah.
right? This is a boundary, isn't it?
Yes. It is. It's an internal boundary. And that's a whole other section in the book that we talk about, where that is where we got to get really clear about how we relate to ourselves when it comes to boundaries. Do you keep your word to yourself? Do you fall down on yourself a lot? Do you keep your word to other people, but not to yourself? And if that's true for you, then that's, and with codependence, a lot, that can be very true, right? Because there's only so much to go around. And if someone else pushes back and needs something, then I'll cancel my Pilates or whatever to go
Yeah.
do that thing, you know?
Yeah.
So internal boundaries are about how you relate to yourself. Do you keep your word to yourself? Do you do the things you say you're going to do for yourself and other people too? It's not just yourself, but for yourself. Um, but you're right. That is an internal boundary where you go,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to become aware of this. I'm going to work I'm going to have these little 5 questions right in my notes on my phone. And when someone starts asking me something, and again, for listeners, here's the thing. I'm not saying that you can never give your opinion. What I'm saying is that giving unsolicited advice, right? Giving unsolicited criticism or advice, or like, well, I don't know why you would do it that way. I would have done it this way. Again, it does not deepen the
Mm-hmm.
intimacy in our relationships. It brings it back to us. And again, there's a centering
Yeah.
of us in the other person's experience. And why should someone else do it the way that we would do it?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
who died and made us God? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's kind of an arrogance in there, right? And I know this a lot stems from a lot of our childhoods where we might have had to care for a sick sibling or a mother, father, or something, and we got very good at helping, and then we got lots of praise for helping.
Yep.
I'm curious. Certainly have tendencies of codependent. I'm definitely on the spectrum here, if there's a spectrum, because it's hard for me as a helper, as someone who's
Mhm.
got a big mission in the world and loves to serve and help, to put myself anywhere near the top of the list. It's like, no, there's 5,000 fires I've got to fight that other people need help with.
Right.
Um, and the cost for me has definitely been health issues. That's usually how the it's shown up for me, is around like, God, I gotta, I don't know. What do you think of self-care? Is self-care too simplistic, or is this actually a really important part of a codependent sort of recovery or an evolution?
It's super important. And actually, it's funny, throughout the entire book, where I'm checking in with self care and giving ideas and giving homework of self care, because I find that anyone with disordered boundaries, anyone who needs to work on their boundaries, usually their self care is pretty paltry. It's
Yeah.
not the best.
Yeah.
And I'm not really, for me, when I think about self care, I'm really not talking about, you know, necessarily like a face mask,
Hmm.
it's having a real relationship with yourself, listening to the wisdom of your body, resting when you're tired,
Hmm.
taking the best care that you are able to do, given on where you live, your socioeconomic situation, how able-bodied you are, within your circumstances, doing the best that you can. Because of course, not everyone has access to all of this. It's, we're all in different places, but considering yourself in a way that will fill up your own
Hmm.
bucket.
Hmm.
When we self nourish in a real way, which means surrounding ourselves with people who fill us up too, not
Yeah.
just the energy vampires, not just the people who have a need. And so there's a whole part of the book and in life that I teach about being really clear about your VIP section
Hmm.
in life, right? Like,
Hmm.
we all have one, whether we know it or not. And like, you're the bouncer and you're literally making the guest list.
Yeah.
You're the person responsible for putting up the velvet rope. And if you don't, what happens is that every person who feels entitled, your third cousin is like, well, obviously I'm coming to your bachelorette party. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, no, Betty, no. But then
Yeah.
maybe the mother is like, but you should invite Betty. She's going to feel terrible.
Hmm.
No, forget it, Betty. You're out. And
Right.
you've got to have your own, like, really looking. So we're doing a lot of inventory and in the book and in life, because when you think about it, we need to know who are we hanging around with?
Yeah.
When we do an inventory, how do I feel? when I leave spending time with this person?
Drained
Do I
or
feel,
inspired
yeah,
or yeah,
exactly.
totally. I love this. I love the VIP section. That's such a great analogy, metaphor. Remember, folks, our Accepted and Connected event is coming up virtually, so you can be right at home, anywhere in the world, and join us. All right, this is going to change your life. It's all about conflict and how to work through it. Here's what Jonas said.
I started listening to Jason's podcast a few years ago because I just felt stuck in some of my relationships, and just recently realized that I keep bumping up against some of the same patterns and blockages in the ways that I cope with conflict in relationship. Despite all of my attempts to break those patterns, I keep repeating them and really not allowing myself to stay in the conflict and to experience the emotions that go along with it and work through those emotions instead of ejecting. And heard about this workshop and thought it'd be a great opportunity to identify specifically those patterns and find ways to work through them and rewire them for myself. I would absolutely recommend the Accepted and Connected course just as a primer for looking at how we experience relationships and how we experience conflict. The biggest thing that I'm going to walk away with is the experience of having the opportunity to hold myself accountable for the role that I play.
All right, there you have it from Jonah. He worked hard and is transforming his life because of this work. Thanks, Jonah. All right, go to relationshipschool.com/connected if you want to register. Early bird, super early bird deal is going away fast. All right, back to the podcast. My version of codependency, I want to get your take on this, is like, it feels like a one-way relationship. I give to you, but you don't give to me. Yet the codependent, there's an exchange there because I'm still getting something back by helping someone. I get the feeling, I get the praise, I get the, they don't fall on their face, like whatever I get.
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe that when it feels like a one-way relationship? And I'm, because a lot of codependents, I imagine, think, well, they are in my VIP section. That's who should be there because they just receive my care so well, and I just give, 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 give. But
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like they don't even know what a relationship is. So can you, I guess, talk about this kind of one-way notion a little bit?
Yeah, like having super inequity in a
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly.
And yes, which is why a lot of times you'll see that there are codependents end up with like narcissistic personality disorders or people who are very self-centered, because the codependent is like, I can't wait to make it all about you and fulfill all your needs. And the other person's like, me too. Like, yay, that works for
Yeah,
me.
fits.
I've done
Perfect.
actually a bunch of videos on like why narcissists and codependents can't break up. It's like literally a match made in heaven until all hell breaks loose, because that eventually it'll happen, because you
Yeah.
can't give like that, because you're not giving from a place of simple kindness, right?
Hmm.
We're giving from a place of need. It's a dysfunctional giving from fear, not
Yeah.
really giving from love. And listen, you may have learned that that is the way to love, and that in your childhood all of us learned these things that were adaptive then, right? We learned how to manage a
Hmm.
difficult parent, a parent who was addicted, a parent who was abusive, whatever situation we were in. Kids are so amazing,
Oh my
and they are
God.
so like, no one needs to actually tell us, right? Like what to
Yeah.
do. We just figure out how to avoid pain and get as much love or safety or comfort or positive feedback as possible. So any of this where you're like, wow, I'm identifying with this, well, holy moly, don't worry, right? Because all of these things that we learned are unlearnable.
Hmm.
Those adaptive things become maladaptive in adulthood. You got to start looking. When you do the relationship inventories, you start thinking, why is it that I am now the one who's filling up all of these buckets? It's Harriet Lerner has this great thing she says about women. It's almost like we feel guilty if we're not like the waste station for everyone in our life to come in,
Yeah.
get filled up, and leave.
Right.
Like, here, I got you. Go. Okay, next. And those are choices too. So back to long ass way around the barn to get back to what you had said about codependence and the one person doing all the things. That is definitely one form of codependent relationship. But the codependent elements that I'm also talking about, that I was talking about with friends, and we're sending them excerpts from the book, Women Who Love Too Much, or whatever we're doing to lessen the suffering of others, that those are codependent tendencies, a desire to fix, even if it's done from a loving place. I'm not saying you can never do those things, but also maybe see what your friend thinks they need to do, right? Instead of centering your friend's pain on yourself. That really shifted for me. When I had that experience with the therapist, I was like, wow. And here I think I was being all Mother Teresa, and I actually was not. And I don't have to do that, right? It's not,
That's a really important point. I don't have to do that, because it seems like so much of it's driven by fear, because the childhood experience is, if I don't do this, someone might actually die, right?
Oh.
It feels that terrifying for some people.
Without a doubt. It is life and death. And that's when I always know, with a client or with myself, if my fear of something is amplified to that degree, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely having a transference right now.
Yeah.
Because if I look at the situation, nobody's going to die, no matter what happens. But my feeling is so urgent. And so we learn to tap into what is going on inside of me. And then how can I identify what is the origin of this, right? We have these original injuries that if we didn't kind of figure them out, they're still sticky. So if you find yourself in a situation that feels familiar, you might have this boom, this amplified response. And then you're like, huh, that was a little much. What was that thing about?
Right.
But, we can just look back, right? And I think we talked about this the last time I was on. We talked about the 3 cues that people can ask, right? Who does the person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before?
Yep.
And how is this behavioral dynamic familiar to me? And this also is a part of learning how to create healthy boundaries. Is the whole process of the methodology that I created that's in the book is really about deeply knowing ourselves and having compassion for our childhood experiences and creating space to heal those, so that we can be in our adult selves as much as possible, rather than being in that state of that scared kid,
Yeah, absolutely. So sweet. I mean, man, so many of us grew up with whatever we grew up with, and aren't even aware of how much it's playing out in the now, And I just appreciate your frame there. So as we wind down, I'm just aware of the time. Give us some boundary. I'm almost getting that, one of the best things a codependent person or whoever's listening, who I might resonate with what we're talking about here, the best remedies for them is to actually start setting some boundaries. Self-awareness, certainly, I gotta actually be aware of myself and what I'm feeling, and stop, making it all about me to try to help someone so that I feel okay. What are some of the basic boundary steps, I guess, perhaps outlined in the book or not, that we can begin to do?
I think there's 2 that I think could be really helpful. So one is to be really mindful to not be giving the auto or the insta yes. When we feel kind of put on the spot, that there are ways to buy time, right? If saying no, a lot of the times, you want to say no. You just don't know how to say no. You just feel awkward. So you can buying time for people where the auto yes is very ingrained is very helpful. So you have 3 or 4 things in your hip pocket that when someone says, hey, we're doing this thing on Saturday, we really love you to come, that you can say, oh, I got to check with so-and-so, I'll get back to you. Or I know we have, if you can't do it, just blurting out. But for some people, that's too threatening. So then buy time. Hey, let me get back to you by the end of the week. I need to check with this person. Let me check my calendar. There's 3 different things to just, one of them is saying, hey, I'll let you know tomorrow because I've instituted a 24-hour decision-making policy. You may not say that.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I teach that, and so many women in my courses are like, I don't know why, but that felt great to say. I love having a 24-hour decision-making policy, right? Because you know how people will be like, I didn't need an answer today by 3. I'm like, well, if you need an answer today by 3 and it's 2:35, then my answer's no.
Yeah.
Like, I always will say, if someone does that and it feels pressuring, unless it's someone who is a friend and I know that I don't feel like they're trying to work me, I'll always just straight up say, I never make instant decisions. So if you need to know right now, then it would have to be no. I mean, unless they were like, I have a ticket to, Super Soul Sunday or something, I'd be like, definitely yes, but
count me in.
Count me in. Get me one of those. So that's one thing, is the awareness of where are you rocking the auto yes, and buying time as a way of not, and also don't be overly accessible on your phone. Like, we are constantly teaching people how to treat us. We're constantly laying out the boundaries, and they are picking it up. So, right. So if you feel like, if you feel like your phone must be on all the time, like my husband does, I'm all like, we're eating, his phone rings. I'm like, put that shit on silent, babe. Like, why?
Right.
Call him back. Call anybody back. Like, I literally have not had the ringer on my phone in 7 years. You know why? Because I don't want you to just call me. You can text me. We literally don't have the ringer on the home phone on at all. Because again, email me, text me, like, this is all at my leisure.
Yeah.
And if it is an emergency, I see my phone all the time. You text me, it's an emergency, I'll call you right away. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm so fancy. It's that I don't want the constriction and the pressure of someone else's expectation. So I train people that I will get back to them in a particular period of time. I tell people, hey, I probably won't be able to get back to you until next week. I probably won't. Can we do a meeting? I can't do a meeting until the end of May. That may sound like, oh, you're so fancy. No, that's just the truth.
Yeah.
So why? I'm not going to dodge you or avoid you. That's actually when I can do it. So that's when we'll do it. So I think that being aware of your sense of urgency that gets sort of infused into you by someone else. Like, I want you to hold on to your own sense of expansion, because that really is what we need. And the other thing, if I may, is there's something that I did, and I can put it on. I have a gift for you. Actually, I have a gift for your people, for you people, actually on codependency and boundaries, because I knew that's what we were going to talk about. Perfect. So it's actually a lesson and a beautiful guide. It's gorgeous. So I will also ask my team, I'm going to write it right now, to put this. I created something around auto accommodating. And this is just the phenomenon of exactly what it sounds like. Automatically accommodating for every situation, for perfect strangers, for being on a plane and being like, I'll move, I don't mind, or I'll do this, or do you need me to get out of the way, even though no one's asked you to get out of the way? That's like,
right.
Yeah. Because again, we are most of the time intruding in on a situation that has nothing to do with us. At least that's when I do it. That's what's happening. Where I'm like, is it okay? I mean, you're busy. Should I not sit at the sink because I have 7 minutes with this thing? I mean, the girl was like, dude, I'll let you know if I need you to move. And this is how this actual blog and the video came about, because I was like, oh my God, I've done all this work, and I'm still worrying about the flow of the sinks in my hair salon. Like, why? It's not my side of the street. Why? So being dialed into where you may be auto accommodating. And again, for those who you love to help, I love to help too. I'm not saying don't be a decent person. I'm saying that you are losing something by doing this. You are losing your internal peace. You are losing a chance to think about your life by automatically. Listen, if you choose to do these things mindfully, whatever you choose to do mindfully is amazing. You're a grown-up. It's your life. It's your choice. But so much about boundaries and internal boundaries and codependency is raising our awareness about where we're on autopilot, because autopilot will not produce our happiest, healthiest, most fulfilling life.
Yeah, right on. Amen to that. Wow, cool. Where can folks find the new book, Boundary Boss? I love the title, The Essential Guide to Talk True, Be Seen, and Finally Live Free.
So you guys, to get your gift, go to boundaryboss.me/Jason. And to get the book, go to boundarybossbook.com. This was so nice, Jace. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, Terri, so much for just what you're doing in the world. And I always enjoy hanging with you and rapping and learning.
Same. Next, my podcast is next.
Cool. We'll talk about my book coming out in a few months.
Yeah, we will. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Take care. Yeah. Very cool. My main action step, other than to go buy Boundary Boss, check her new book out, Terri Cole, or go to boundaryboss.com or boundaryboss.me/Jason to get the special stuff, okay, that she's got prepped for you. The action step, I think, is pretty straightforward here, and it's to say no in the next 48 hours to somebody. When they ask you to do something, they ask a favor of you, the challenge here is to say no. Or if that feels too strong, too direct, too intense for you, one step down is what Terri suggested, this 24-hour policy. Someone asks you to lunch, coffee, tea, Zoom call, whatever they ask you to do, say, you know what, I need to think about it, or I've got a lot going on. Give me 24 hours and I'll get back to you. That way it buys you time to kind of craft your response. And codependency folks tend to be yes people. And you don't need help with that. So you need help practicing saying no, thank you, and doing something for yourself instead. So that's your challenge today, to say no within the next 48 hours. As always, be accountable to someone and tell someone what you're doing and that you got it done. Okay. You can do that in our Facebook group, relationshipschool.com/community, or you can just do it with a friend who listens to this podcast as well, or a partner, or someone who doesn't listen to this podcast. Just tell them what you're up to and say, hey, I'm going to challenge myself to say no in the next 48 hours. I will text you when I have completed that challenge. Mission accomplished. Nice. All right. And then again, another reminder to come play with us at our Accepted and Connected event, because that's what you want to feel on the other side of conflict, is you want to feel like your partner, friend, or someone else accepts you for who you are and you feel connected to them. Okay. That's the feeling most of us want. And we want that day in and day out. But what I'm saying in high stakes relationship is you got to earn that by learning how to work through the tough stuff, i.e. conflict. Okay. That's what my new book is all about, coming out in October 5th. Save that date. Okay. Relationshipschool.com/connected. All right, y'all. We'll see you very soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.